Thank you for choosing this training video as part of your quest for more knowledge and expertise in combating human trafficking. I am Professor Rosa Patti. Our Human Trafficking Academy has designed these training videos to benefit law enforcement, legal professionals, educators, healthcare professionals, religious organizations, and the community at large. The experts featured in them dig deeper into the efforts made by the government, the public sector, and civil society working together in partnership to raise awareness about trafficking in human beings, to assess and address the root causes that make people vulnerable, to understand the intricate structure of the crime and the modus operandi of its perpetrators, to curb the demand of this billions of dollars illicit industry, to identify, rescue, and protect the victims and their families, and above all, to rehabilitate our society and steer it towards a more ethical and compassionate coexistence. Trafficking in human beings, modern-day slavery, is the worst affront to the dignity of the human person. It's an infamy that poisons the human society. But it does not have to accompany us perpetually. We can and should put an end to it. This is our lifetime trial, and we are never tried beyond our strengths. And now I invite you to hear from those who are at the forefront of eradicating this human-by-human exploitation and have made combating trafficking their life's most noble cause.
Human trafficking is a very pervasive problem in this world of ours today. And not only is it pervasive, but one of the big problems is it's largely hidden. It's hidden from people's attention, and it's a hidden issue because you never know who a human slave is. Right now, the estimation is there are about 30 million people in the world in some kind of bondage or slavery. Most of them are young people. Many of them are women and children. And it's one of the crimes that is up there with drugs and with illegal arms.
Human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to compel someone into labor, including sexual acts that are forced upon the victims.
It's an economic crime that has yielded at this point up to $32 billion, we're estimating. And it is basically one person being forced to work against their will in a different sector for the profit of another.
It's highly unlikely that a man, woman, or child will walk up to you and say, "Oh, I think I'm being trafficked. Can you help me?"
That's what makes human trafficking so difficult to identify. We might find a case with all what we might call typical signs, and then another one with none of the indicators present. But some of the red flags that we have found is that individuals are being controlled, or someone is watching over their work. They might be working and not paid at all. You might see some physical signs such as bruises, they've been beaten, cuts, stabs, etc. You might find that the individual is fearful of talking to you. You might find that a young adult is being forced into prostitution, and that is an automatic, since a minor involved in commercial sex is seen as a human trafficking victim in the eyes of law enforcement and of social service providers in the field.
So some of these signs will be visual signs, others may be embedded in a story. They may share with you certain information, such as that they're working but not getting all of their pay, or perhaps that they're living in the same workspace where they're working. Or maybe someone says, "I'm a little worried because my employer has my passport and says he's not going to give it back."
The victims come from everywhere in the world, including from the country, from the United States. So one of the characteristics of when we talk and we try to talk about a profile or who is a victim of human trafficking, the only thing in common that I can say that goes across the board is the vulnerability. A human being that presents some form of vulnerability makes them vulnerable to the traffickers to be recruited and exploited.
Some of these vulnerabilities include the promises of a better life, of marriage and love, of opportunities in different sectors, in the case of young girls, to be a model or a singer. And a lot of times we see that traffickers exploit different situations, such as that there might be substance abuse or even familiarity. We've seen that a lot of times traffickers and their victims are from the same ethnic group, same religious group, they speak the same languages. And so traffickers know what hooks or what to use to gain these individuals' trust and ultimately force them into a human trafficking situation.
In Florida, we find, and it's due to the characteristics of our state, we find trafficking manifesting in the agricultural sector, the restaurants, domestic workers, or women, mostly women taking care of children, nannies. It also manifests in the area of the sex industry, mostly forced prostitution. We have heard also of cases of pornography, exotic dancing, for example, not just forced prostitution.
Faith-based communities are one of the few groups of people that will have regular exposure to victims of trafficking while they're still under control of their traffickers. Building trust with victims is one of the most important things that we can do as a community, because once we have their trust, then they're willing to open up. And a lot of it takes patience and time. It's important to get the victim alone without being suspicious. It's important to listen without judging. It's important to open your arms without trying to make them feel like they're in danger.
You don't ever want to promise something that you cannot deliver to a trafficked person. So when you're speaking with a person who has been trafficked, you want to be clear that A, you're not going to reach out for any kind of help unless they have asked you to do so. Many trafficked people are very afraid of the authorities. Perhaps their country of origin has had police force that has been a source of fear within their community. And often the idea that someone would call the authorities is precisely used to keep trafficked persons in their place and keep them afraid and working. And so before doing anything, you need to get the consent of the trafficked person to reach out for help. And you want to do that as quietly and as carefully as possible.
If someone identifies a victim of human trafficking, if that victim is in immediate danger, they should call 911. There are also some different resources in their communities that they can go ahead and contact. If they're not aware of any agencies in South Florida or their particular community that work with victims of trafficking, they can call the National Human Trafficking Resource Center at 1-888-3737-888 and ask them for some guidance in how to assist that individual. The National Human Trafficking Resource Center can also identify and provide them the information for local providers.
Faith-based communities can provide truly essential services to victims that are unique. Faith support to people who have been trafficked can be a source of healing and strength and connection during a time of trauma. However, we must be aware that this is never the time to evangelize, nor is it the time to impose our beliefs upon another person. Another way that faith communities can support trafficked persons, of course, is in that long process of going through the legal system, going through this time of putting their lives back together, seeking employment. Congregations can be resources for helping people who desperately need some jobs in order to keep income flowing for them and their families, but who have been trafficked, helping people find placements that can really help them get back on their feet.
Some of the things that faith-based communities can do to respond include funding resources. Very often clergy will have funds at their disposal that they can use to help victims of human trafficking. Also, we tend to know where victims can go, hotlines to call, and we have people who tend to let clergy know that they are available to help. One of the biggest things that we can do to shine a light on this issue is advocacy. We have the pulpit, we have the microphone, we have the ability to talk out, talk loud, and get heard.
I also think that we need to educate the community. They're often the ones who are spotting this and dealing with it, and we need to talk to our young people. So, A, they can spot it, and B, when they get in a position to be able to do something about it, they can do something.
Faith communities have also been extremely important in advocacy campaigns, particularly with corporations.
Human trafficking is very lucrative. It's not just a question of eradicate the issue. It's really getting at the core of the financial issues as well. And for that reason, we need to engage business. The traffickers are making money off people. And in many cases, businesses are unwilling or unknowing participants in the whole thing. So we have to sensitize the businesses to that.
We are, as faith-based communities, responsible for preventing human trafficking by educating our partners. If our congregations know what's happening, then they can look for it. Be aware of where their food comes from and be aware of where their products come from so that the supply chain is cut short when things are made with low moral values. We want the things that we consume, food, clothing, entertainment, other services, to be made with the highest standards, both of quality of product and quality of treatment of workers. It's up to us to be people who are the light unto the nations, to shine light on the issues that need to be out in the open.